Hello, and welcome to the Artificial Podcast, with your host Nick Myers.
Artificial
Intelligence,
voice recognition, machine learning,
robotics,
actionable analytics.
It is Nick's goal to help everyone understand how AI and voice technology are reshaping our lives both personally and within organizations. Your glimpse into the growing world of AI and voice first starts now.
Nick Myers.
Nick Myers. Nick Myers.
Nick Myers.
Welcome to the Artificial Podcast. My name is Nick Myers, and I am here to help break down topics in emerging technology, artificial intelligence, and voice assistant tech to help everyone understand how these technologies are impacting our lives both personally and within our organizations. The Artificial Podcast is brought to you by Red Fox AI. Red Fox AI helps give brands a voice by leveraging the power of AI and voice assistant technologies like Alexa and Google Assistant. If you or your organization is interested in sponsoring an episode, please send an email to the Artificial Podcast at redfox-ai.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or anywhere that you stream podcast episodes. You can also follow the Artificial Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube by searching for the Artificial Podcast. You can join our brand new Facebook group exclusively for listeners of the show, where you can meet other artificial podcasters from around the world who are interested in emerging technology just like you. A link to our Facebook group has been included in the episode notes. Thank you for listening, and now a quick word from our sponsors before we jump into this week's episode. Hey, Brett.
What's up, Nick?
You know, on the Artificial Podcast, we talk a lot about the future of conversational AI and voice assistant technologies, right?
So you mean basically in every episode we do?
All right, wise guy. But seriously, think about it. I don't think we truly realize how quickly voice assistants like Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri, Cortana, and Bixby, just to name a few, have embedded themselves in our daily lives. I mean, the analysts are predicting that in a little more than 3 years, there will likely be 8 billion, yes, billion, voice assistant users connected to nearly 2 billion global websites, more than 40 billion connected devices.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot. But what are you trying to get here, basically?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that for numbers like these to truly become a reality, a few things need to happen.
Yeah, like more technology innovations?
Well, yes, but I'm thinking of something more, something even more important. We need to have trust. Trust between the users and the technology itself.
Okay, yeah, I'll be honest. Sometimes I daydream about these voice assistants getting smart enough to rise up and take over like Skynet, from Terminator.
Well, I mean, yeah, sure, that could happen, I suppose, but I'm talking about things like trustworthy privacy and trustworthy accessibility and trust that if you're a business, you have full rights to your name and your brand. Have you heard about the Open Voice Network?
No, I haven't. Can you tell me a little bit more about them?
I would love to, Brett. Well, in a nutshell, the Open Voice Network is a non-profit directed fund of the Linux Foundation that is dedicated to making voice assistants worthy of user trust. Members of the Open Voice Network include conversational AI designers, strategists, developers, and other industry professionals from all around the world who are dedicated to paving the way for a future where voice can be trusted and benefits everyone. I'm proud to say that I've been a member since early this year, and it has truly been one of the best decisions I have made since becoming a voice practitioner. And if you're in the industry, I highly encourage you to check it out and join.
Sweet. That sounds cool. So what you're saying is Skynet isn't going to happen?
Oh, Brett.
If you are interested in learning more about the Open Voice Network and how you can get involved, visit www.openvoicenetwork.org or send an email to john.stein@openvoicenetwork.org. The Open Voice Network. Voice assistants worthy of user trust.
Hey there, Artificial Podcasters. Welcome back to another week and another episode of the Artificial Podcast. This week, I am excited to welcome Vicki Cantrell to the Artificial Podcast. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Vicki through our mutual work in the Open Voice Network. And after reaching out to her and just having a brief discussion, she's just blown me away with her knowledge in so many different areas of of retail, the different companies she's been a part of. I mean, she's pretty incredible with all the things she's done. So I'm really excited to have her on the show. But before I welcome Vicki, let me tell you a bit about Vicki Cantrell. Vicki is a retail strategist, community builder, former COO and CIO in the retail industry, and is recognized for relationship building and accelerated growth. Along with co-founding the Vendors in Partnership VIP Awards, her most recent venture is Vendors in Partnership LLC, with the mission of celebrating strong partnerships between retailers and the support ecosystem. She is also a managing board member of the Open Voice Network, an industry group dedicated to bringing the value of open, standards-based voice assistants to enterprise and the world as voice reshapes consumer behavior. Vicki has previously held senior leadership roles in IT, marketing, and operations for brands and organizations such as Aptos, the National Retail Federation, Tory Burch, Giorgio Armani Corporation, Gucci Group, Party City, and J.C. Penney. Vicki is an active member of the Retail Orphan Initiative, is on the advisory board of Sparks and Honey, and is a board member of Tandy Leather Company. Vicki, welcome to the Artificial Podcast. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much, Nick. I really appreciate you having me on today.
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time, because I know, of course, you're working on so many different things right now as well. So just being able to get some of your time here and talk with you about all the incredible things you've been working on, and of course, maybe diving into the future of different technologies and ultimately I think how they're going to impact, retail, since I know that's definitely a big part of your background. So really excited to have you on the show.
Thanks.
So I think let's get things started here and kick off with, what has your journey been like so far, and what led you to so many different leadership roles in IT, marketing, operations, et cetera, at some of the world's leading retailers and fashion brands?
I would say, if I wanted to kind of capsulize it quickly, I would tell you that I live and breathe retail and always have. And I have jumped to different sides of the retail industry and being not only part of some amazing retailers, but also been on the side of the solution provider community. And that's been really helpful to really understand what each person's challenges are. And then I've also had the great fortune to, with the National Retail Federation, to kind of be the industry spokesperson for retail, managing the business groups of the people inside retail and bringing them to not only understand how they can fight for different issues and policies that are important to retail, but really doing community building. And you'll hear me talk a lot about how critical it is to build communities. I have had the ability to go outside of my lane in all the companies that I've been with, which has been this is what really has allowed me to work in all the different areas of retail.
Yeah.
Great forward-thinking companies that allowed me to work in customer experience. I'm a business person first. Before a technologist. And so there's been a lot of crossover with understanding how I was able to bring some operational discipline when we had all of those mergers and acquisitions at Gucci, and really bringing the communities together at NRF so that they could understand what each other's challenges were and work better together.
Yeah, and I remember too when we first chatted, you kind of dove, into all of the different roles that you were able to hold rather at some of these different companies. I can only imagine how that's just, shaped your skill set and your talent to ultimately lead you to where you are right now, which I just found absolutely fascinating, because especially, at some of these, brands that all of us are so familiar with, I can only imagine what it must have been like to go through, the merge. You said the merger of Gucci Group when they acquired a handful of different companies and different things, and leading strategy, technology, customer experience at some of these places. I just can only imagine.
It's been a great ride.
So with your breadth of experience and so many different roles at so many different brands, what has been your greatest challenge and greatest success? Bit of a loaded question there, but I can't wait to hear your answer.
Yeah, it is a loaded question. But, with me, what you see is what you get. So I'll be honest. I think it's, people really do need to talk about their challenges and not pretend that they haven't had some. And when you've been at it as long as I have, there have been a few. I would say that the greatest challenge is assessing risk with extreme or rapid growth. And the reason I bring that up is not only did I, have kind of a smack in the face with it, and having worked for brands and been in situations that had extreme and rapid growth, I think it's important to understand now, because right now we have rapid growth of online experience. And so I'm sure there's plenty of people, retailers and otherwise, who are struggling with the right thing to do with something that is growing at an unusual pace and hard to manage. So I would tell you that the challenge there, it's a challenge because, you're changing the tires on a car going 60 miles an hour. And it's important, but I would stress that transparency is important. Integrity is important. We had a situation where I had a brand that was growing so fast, we were actually disappointing the customer.
Wow.
And, there's no such thing as a good problem to have when you are dealing with the customer and disappointing them.
Right.
And we were able to really be transparent with them and bring them under into the fold, so they understood what was happening. People will help you through your biggest challenges. So I would say that that's the biggest challenge, but it's flexibility of people, looking at the people that work for you and understanding how they're not too stuck in their ways and can be flexible is also kind of a critical aspect of how you manage through these rapid growth transitions.
Yeah, and if you had to maybe name, something that you're really proud of, a really good success, what would that be?
Well, I'm lucky that there have been many, but I would say when I thought about it, it really all revolves around people. It's really not about the technology. My biggest achievements have had to do with people and getting people comfortable and getting people to do things and understanding each other. Empathy is really important. And when I say empathy, as soon as you understand what someone else's challenges are, you can interact with them better. We see that in our everyday life, in politics and everything else. And if you can do that, so my biggest success is, even though I cultivated the communities within NRF and they all had their own peer group, bringing them together as a unit to understand each other's aspects and challenges was a big success, and they were able to solve problems jointly. And that leads to untold improvements in business. So I was really proud of that. And, my role during all of the mergers at Gucci was to, people were getting acquired. They're nervous. They're worried about their roles, their lives, their jobs. And our kind of committee came together and figured out what is their talent, how do we redeploy and figure out what they do best. And it was really satisfying. So I would tell you that my biggest successes have to do with getting people to perform better.
Yeah, no, that's I really like that, and I like that you brought up the point of empathy too, because that really can be a game changer for a company if they understand that and deploy that correctly, right? You look at some of the largest companies today. Let's use Amazon as an example, where they are incredibly open, and their whole stick is we're customer obsessed, right? And it's that leading with empathy that I think makes or breaks part of the experience. And you can see the companies that do that really well, and you can see the ones that don't. And of course, the ones that do it really well, my gosh, the growth they have is unparalleled in some cases. And the ones that don't, well, sometimes they may not be around anymore. So I really like that you brought up that empathy point, because I think no matter what industry you work in, whether you work in technology or not, that is the most important thing to keep in mind. And honestly, when we look at technology, I think that is probably the most important thing, right? Because the purpose of technology is to enhance the human outcome.
Right.
And part of that is leading with empathy. So I really like that you brought that up.
Thanks. And your point about Amazon is what it fortunately and unfortunately illustrates is when you talk about them being customer obsessed, they live it and breathe it.
Hmm.
And there's many, many people that talk about being customer obsessed or the customer's at the center and we do the customer, but they don't, it's not part of their DNA.
Right.
They want it, they think they do it, they try hard, they make incremental changes, but it's really part of the DNA at Amazon to, even at their own, what somebody would think of as at their own peril, or lack of benefit,
Right.
but it's worked for them.
Absolutely. And you can
Yeah.
you can always tell too the ones that really embrace that as a part of who they are versus the ones that don't. And I think we could all probably draw up our own list, and we could match them to the ones that we know that do. And we would all probably be on the same page, I would imagine. So yeah, I agree with you completely, and I really like that empathy piece you brought up. So, but when it comes to technology, what are some of the major ways that you have seen technology transform the retail industry, in your experience? And what are some, moments in time or history that really stand out to you as transformational?
Yeah, there's many. I'm really glad you asked that because technology changes so quickly. People
Right.
think of what's happened in the last 10 years. But if you take it to the last, let's just talk 20 years, 2 decades, it's amazing to think what has happened in that time. I mean, let's talk late 90s, early, 2000. It's the internet. It's
Hmm.
online shopping. Okay. Obviously the internet was around before that, but it's online shopping and watching that happen. And, I'll run through a few here because I was really kind of jazzed about this question. So
Awesome.
mobile is probably the underlying most critical thing.
Hmm.
And when you think about it, it's really at the core of everything because today, not at the beginning, but today we're a mobile first society.
Right.
Everything we do is mobile first. And when you think about why mobile is so important, it makes all of the other transformations. Okay, Facebook, Uber, money transfer. When you think about how easy it is to deal with your money,
Yep.
social. Okay, none of this is without a mobile first mentality. So just really the advent of mobile was critical. As it relates to retail more, I would say that some of the big transitions were mobile POS, because then that did two things. It put sales associates with the customer
Yeah.
again, and also, which is something that can't really, you really need to talk about this, is it put product info in the hands of the sales associate. If you want a
Hmm.
good customer experience, you got to put product info in their hands. It's terrible when the customer knows more about something than you
Yeah.
do, right?
I've been in that situation myself a few times, and it's almost kind of like a turnoff, I'll be honest.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And some of the things are so ubiquitous today that we don't even remember. Okay, Wi-Fi, critical.
Hmm.
Having the stores able to incorporate some new technology, and having the customer be able to deal with their own technology inside the store. So Wi-Fi, video, video again, ubiquitous. But remember when video was not something you did every day.
Hmm.
And now you can shop that way. You can shop from a video. Um, Inventory visibility and ship from store, key things for retailers. It was very disruptive at the time. Stores were not equipped or the right size or whatever to be able to become a shipping organization.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a big deal. And why would you be shipping from store? Because you need inventory visibility. So the technological connectors that enabled us to see inventory from disparate systems, because they are, the e-commerce system was different than the store system,
Yeah.
was pretty interesting. And then more recently, I would say AI as it relates to call centers,
Hmm.
operations, those aspects. And then overarching, we can't really, I mean, we could go on forever about this, but I was trying to think of the ones that really made an impact. And I would say the cloud,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
just, it's people in general, every user is not restricted by their own single device, which, for those of us who used to have to put in new servers what seemed like every other month. You know, it's really is a game changer.
Yeah. No, I think every single one of those you've touched on are excellent. And, of course, I'm a bit younger, so I've only been able to see some of this evolve since, I can remember since probably the mid late 2000s. But it's been really interesting to see the impact that technology has had on retail. And, I can remember a time when, most people really didn't shop online, and that wasn't even a thought. And then it's like, I felt like when I got into college is when that really, really started to take off.
Yeah.
That was in the early 2010s, but it's been really interesting to see how retail has transformed, and it still is too, right? I mean, we look at everything in the wake of the pandemic. I mean, that's presented a whole new set of both challenges and opportunities, and I think technology, of course, is going to be the one to come in and help tackle those challenges. I don't know if any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I guess my point is technology is critical. It's the use of technology, though. It is not in a vacuum. It's
Right.
it's really about adoption. It's about um, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense. When we were talking at one point, and we'll probably touch on this again, is what people do, and retailers have done this too. I'm going to put in this bells and whistles in this cool thing, and it really didn't move the needle in my business.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have to think about it that way. I would say that as you think about technology, some is the important aspects are, some are seen and some are unseen by the customer. Okay. It's always going to be about frictionless. When you think about the customer, or you think about yourself as a customer, think about what you like and what you don't like. Anything that represents frictionless is always going to be critical. And
Right.
that brings up personalization. Okay, personalization isn't just what you serve up to them. Okay, they searched for shoes, so you're going to serve up shoes. It's really more about how to do it, when to do it. And again, that could be as simple as, I know they're interacting with their mobile from 5 to 6 p.m., so that's when I'm going to serve it up. Okay, it could be that, but that's really not getting into what's important in their life. So you got to think bigger about what personalization is and what your consumer means to you. And to do that, as far as I'm concerned, you have to think of them as a person and understand their life. What are their challenges today? What do they deal with every day? Do they have kids? Do they not? What is their life like? And what's become so important to a consumer now is, what do you represent as a brand?
Yes. That's a really good point.
That's it. And the better you can communicate that, the better you're going to be, because it's critical to a consumer now. They're making decisions in a very different way.
Yes.
So, they
Yeah,
have
absolutely.
to. I agree.
See, I really like that you brought up that point too, because that's something that's evolved over the last couple of decades too, right? Like, I can only imagine there was a point in time where you didn't really care. Well, brands probably more or less weren't as outspoken as they are now on their stances with certain issues and things happening in the world. But now it's almost an expectation that a brand, this is where they stand with this particular issue, and then you make a purchase judgment off that. I've definitely noticed that over the last couple of years, I think more than any other point in time, personally.
Yeah. Having been a branded person my whole life and dealing with such leading brands, it really went from, as a brand, you went from telling the consumer what they need to telling the consumer who you are. Okay. And it's a major shift over the last 2 decades, I would say.
Absolutely. Well, and this may be a good segue then into what I'm about to ask next. So, how do you think the overall customer experience in retail, and maybe this can even be applied to almost every industry, how do you think the overall customer experience has been impacted by some of these new pieces of technology? Maybe you touched on that a bit, but I don't know if you can maybe dive a bit deeper.
Yeah, so AI is really ubiquitous in retail from an operational perspective, the under the covers. Okay. anything that was taking out unnecessary steps that are routine, improved warehouses, supply chain, call centers, really importantly, interpreting data behind the scenes and understand. So it's really been a critical force in retail. It's not only determining which marketing strategies work best for each person. We talked about personalization. You can really better understand that customer specific needs. Okay. There's some really good examples of how brands are utilizing this. The beauty industry in general is big in this and has had a lot of success. Ulta's done some really great things with their virtual beauty, and there's Sephora has done similar, but operating rapidly and getting more products on it at a time when the customer really wanted to be online versus in store has been important. I think Vitamin Shop has done some great things. And what I like about the way they think is how they truly are customer first. They would completely revamping their stores from a customer first perspective, which was a complete remodel. But today, without thinking about what it looks like in the store, it's their partnerships that they're pushing. So they just partnered with Instacart to be able to deliver better, faster, and again, we talk again about personalization. What does that customer need? What's going to make it easier for that customer? So those are a couple of examples of how people are really utilizing some of the technology that's out there.
Yeah, and you even maybe think of another example. I know the last time I shopped for sunglasses, I started online, but I was able to actually try them out online.
Yeah, exactly, right?
That is transformational to me because, again, now it even, nothing against physically going into a sunglass shop, but it helps me make that preliminary decision so I can save time because I know at least if I'm able to try it on virtually, I can get an idea of how it looks, maybe the fit, then I can go right to the store, know exactly what I want, personalizing my experience even a bit more and helping me go down that path of making the purchase that much easier. So that's one thing that popped into my head that I've noticed has been being used and even outside of sunglasses. Wayfair, they do that whole AR thing where you can place, the whatever piece of furniture you're buying and inside your living room to scale. I think that's incredible.
It really, oh my gosh, it's a game changer. You know what you said that I love about your example is the point is it is in the experience, whether it's half online, half in store, whatever it is, it's in your hands.
Right.
So if you were going to buy sunglasses and know that it's going to take 2 hours, your decision was whether an hour of that is by myself at home and an hour of that is right. So the fact that it's in your hands and the fact that technology can help a brand represent to a consumer the easiest possible frictionless way that they want to interact with the brand, putting it in their hands with all they have to deal with their life is really critical. That's the difference, in your hands. You're not losing business by, there's plenty of retailers that would hate me for this statement. You're not losing business by somebody who is shopping on Amazon while they're in your store.
Right.
Yeah. But the point is you have to make it easy for them to interact with you the way they want to interact with you.
Right. Well, and I'll even admit, when, pre-COVID-19, I'll even admit there's times I went to Best Buy to look for a specific electronic and I would go there, I'd, play, see it in person, and I then would go online to see if it could possibly be cheaper anywhere. If it was cheaper, sometimes I left the store to go buy it online. Sometimes I bought it right there. More often than not, if it wasn't cheaper, I would buy it right there in the store.
Of course.
So I to your point of, are you actually losing business by, somebody being on the internet in your store? I actually almost think it almost complements the entire experience in a certain way. But that may just be my personal opinion.
You know what? That's a really great thing that you say that. And the faster people accept that, okay, that it makes it even better. Like someone is going to think that they had a great experience in Best Buy because they were able to see it, etc. I mean, you know, things are going to become more merged and less discreet as we go forward. So how you represent yourself as a brand, whether it be in customer service or a great associate or pleasant environment or the 100 things you could do, will make a difference.
Right. Well, and people, of course, you know, part of purchasing is with emotion, right? So you're more than likely to purchase something from a brand if there's a really powerful, you know, emotion that makes you feel good about what you're doing, where that emotion is just, it just fills you up with feeling great, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that in so many ways makes or break that for retail, to some of the points you've made, because you know, there's been many moments where I've been in a retail store, again, prior to everything going on, and I had a really poor in-store experience. I
Sure.
never went back, you know, and that's what would draw me to online, because, all right, well, you know I'm going to get a good experience from Amazon every single time, so I'm going to keep using them. But likewise, there were times where Amazon has frustrated the heck out of me. I had a really good in-store experience. I'll keep going inside that store. You know, Vicki, one thing I really noticed, and again, I haven't gone out much since all this started, but I actually went to Target a couple of weeks ago, and I'll be honest, I have not been inside of a Target since probably sometime last year.
Yeah.
And I went in, and it was like night and day. I don't know what they did, but the entire experience just felt more personalized and tailored to whatever was going on. Hopefully I'm not like rambling here. I'm just trying to
Oh,
figure out.
no, it's great to hear personal experiences.
Yeah, I don't know what they did with their model, but just walking through the store, there was this different energy that was not there before the pandemic, if that makes sense. So whatever happened there to change the experience, it seemed like they were leaning more on technology too. There were more self-checkout lanes. It's like things were positioned differently. I just noticed a couple of different things that just made the experience feel that much better, I guess.
Well, they have really, they're just in the process of constantly reinventing and doing, you know, they really have done some great things, and their numbers are showing it. But I'd like to put one other thing into this mix and highlight the fact that, you know, we love to talk about technology, but the employees and the people, the employees and the customers made that a great experience. Yes, the technology was there to make it frictionless, but this is the one thing that I see after going back and shopping since the pandemic is you feel better as a customer because these people are back to work.
Right.
Okay. At least for me, I like going into a store because I feel like, oh my God, they're working. They're happy to be working. You know,
Yeah.
generally I'm making generalizations, but people feel differently about the people aspect, and they've seen how much this thing hit us as people, hit
Right.
employees as people, hit our normal, convenient way of life. Okay. And I think that people have a different mind set, and they also have an expectation. They're expecting something to be super uncomfortable when they walk in those doors.
Yep, absolutely.
When it isn't, okay, I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to people almost every day who say, I went back into a store, oh my God, it felt so normal. You know, like anything that represents normalcy is really
That's
important
actually
to
funny you
people.
say that, because that is exactly how I felt when I was going to Target, because I had to get something there that no other store had, you know, shockingly enough. But I walked in and I was expecting it to be like, actually, I didn't even know what to expect. I didn't know, you know, with all the social distancing that's going on and everything, how that would be treated. Like, I was going in blind, and I walked in and it was done so well that it actually felt good to walk around to Target. And I'm not like an in-store shopper by any ways or means, but it just felt good. And then I even got a Starbucks after that, and it just felt good.
Yep. Yep.
Because there was
Yeah.
Starbucks inside the Target, and it was like everything. It was just so good. It was just so
Yeah.
nice. So I'm glad you made that point, because I think that has been the perspective of a lot of people in this, is when you're, you know, spending more time at home and you're removed, and of course, you know, different things are going on. You don't know what to expect when you go back into a retail store right now, but seeing, you know, people working and seeing just everything function really well, and some of the positive changes that have been done, it is so comforting.
I had the same experience in a hotel last weekend where I felt, you don't know what to expect. Are you going to be comfortable in your room? Is there dining options?
Yeah.
And honestly, I felt once I got there and saw everything they put into place, I was completely comfortable that I was in a safe environment.
Yeah, and I think, this is definitely a trend we're going to be seeing more of course, as things start to settle down. But that's good to hear that from, because again, I haven't traveled or been in any hotels since all this started too. So that's even comforting to know that you had an amazing experience recently in that area, because I know, of course, travel and hospitality have been hit pretty hard. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think everything is changing the customer experience game, and it really is interesting and exciting to see some of the changes specifically, I think, that retail is making, of course, to address what the customer is focusing on now, which is insanely important. So when we look at, I know you briefly touched on AI here, but maybe another technology. Of course, we're both in the open voice network and work with voice technology. How do you think an emerging technology like voice can be used to enhance or create an entirely new customer experience? And maybe are there any brands or retailers that that are experimenting or deploying this with a focus on CX?
Um, well, I was going to say something, but as soon as you said with a focus on CX, that means it's a separate thing.
Yeah.
They should be thinking first of CX and then determining what they should do. Not, I want to do voice.
Yeah.
Okay. How will this impact the customer? No, it's, does the customer need voice?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry. I just have to
No, please, by all means.
make that distinction of start with the customer 24/7, 100% of the time, period. And then you determine what you're going to do. But now that I've given you that little speech and admonition, let's talk about how it's important. I think voice is going to transform retail and everything else, by the way, because of this aspect. And I had a conversation earlier today about it. I think that it's voice that is going to be one of the catalysts that create a scenario where the customer is in fact in control of their own data.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an important aspect that we're working on is, you don't realize how much you interact with voice today. Okay. And between the billions, and it is billions of devices that are in your car, in your house, on your phone, etc. And I can't use any of those names. Otherwise, half the devices in the office I'm in will go off.
Same here.
So we won't talk about that. But there's a lot that's already going on. But I think today it's voice has a trust problem.
Mm-hmm.
And there aren't standards associated with it yet. So people don't fully understand what happens with their voice, okay? And they think of it a little bit esoterically instead of the specificity of what it is. It's a voice print that has characteristics that it really translates to data and can be used in certain ways and parsed and etc. And so this aspect of, what we're talking about is consent around this type of commerce, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It becomes very important since trust is so critical across the consumer experience, is how we're going to put in the hands of the consumer a way that they can say, here's all my data, I have it all, okay? You can have, I'm about to buy something, you can have this much data, vendor or retailer 1, 2, 3, because I have it in a place I can control. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I know that it exists today. Your data might be sitting in Amazon. Okay. My data is sitting in Amazon.
Right.
And so I can do that by voice today, but I'm talking about generally where the consumer will get control of their own data and then parse it out to different retailers and allow them. And I think even though it's not voice specifically, I think voice is going to create that scenario that enables us to make a leap forward in that aspect. Now, then I would talk about the consumer experience standpoint. I think it's critical to understand sentiment and emotion. And this is how voice really helps us. When you're in a, circular hellhole of customer press one, here's your
Yes.
options, and you're sitting there
Yep.
yelling, representative.
I think we've all probably been there, so that's a really good point to relate on.
Think about the customer experience again. Being able to utilize emotion and sentiment will be so helpful for everyone. Okay, you'll be able to say, before they've reached the end of their breaking point, I'm going to step in here and I'm going to give them a great customer experience. And then utilizing that who they are by their voice print, and you do. It's almost like a fingerprint. Okay. Yep. How you can utilize that for their benefit. So I see there's lots of I feel like we're, of course, at the early stages, but we're really working on trust, choice, accessibility, and openness, and lots to cover there, but really exciting.
Oh, absolutely. And that plays into the work that I think you and I both are trying to get accomplished in the Open Voice Network, because OVN is all about setting the standards. It's all about trying to close that user trust gap. And I think those of us who have been really involved the last several months, we see the light at the really long end of that tunnel, and we know that there is a way to get there. It's just doing all these things that are hard to do, but when they're done, it's going to allow this industry and allow this technology rather to just boom.
Yeah.
I know that's something you and I have talked about as well.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's an exciting field, and again, it's going to be. We talked about this early in this conversation. Instead of talking about, what should I do to the consumer, what should I do for the consumer, it's going to be more about who is my customer and how do I best have a relationship with them. Right.
I agree completely. Yes, and I think that relationship building aspect of it is only going to become more important. I think about the current relationships that I have with, well, let me back up a bit, because I've been diving into research all across the board since the pandemic started, even before that, about because part of what we're working on at Red Fox AI is we're trying to start an e-commerce business, but that's also focused, or really heavily focused, on voice, where people can order what we're offering via voice. And as I've been in the process of designing and creating that with our CTO, I've just been diving into retail research in general. Mm-hmm. And brand loyalty, it almost seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, Vicki, has also definitely changed over the last couple of decades. It almost seems like there was a really strong brand loyalty with generations we would consider to be X and baby boomer and above now, but when you look at millennial and Gen Z, they have a bit of a less brand loyalty. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean it to where they don't necessarily care so much about loyalty to one specific brand versus where can I get the best deal, what company or brand can I go to give me the best product or service at the best period of time. I don't know if that you've seen that at all either, or have any thoughts on that.
I absolutely have thoughts on that. And again, the transition of what a brand represents to a consumer, regardless of age, what went from the brand being the determiner to the customer being the determiner, and that opened all kinds of other things, okay, where you don't have control over that. Now, I would say, though, what's kind of important when you talk about there's no brand loyalty, that's kind of doesn't give enough color to I know what you're talking about. Everybody talks about that, that if I can get it better, faster, cheaper somewhere else, I'm not going to be loyal to that brand. Okay, so it's a real thing. It's absolutely true. It just means that you can achieve brand loyalty if you are behaving differently than you do today that created the non-brand loyalty. In other words, what have you done to make yourself important to the person? Okay. And that changes. So it's hard for retailers. It changes all the time. Okay. Do they care about whether I source sustainably, do they care about, all the myriad of things that could happen. So one thing I'll point out here that is really important to quote unquote brand loyalty is, again, about the people. People want to be part of a part of a community. So you have to understand what that means for, it's not brand loyalty, it's my tribe. Okay. And so if your brand represents their tribe, that creates a different type of loyalty. Community is really important to the consumer these days. What makes them feel like they belong to something, whether it's the the people that use the same beauty products as I do,
Right.
or the people that love dogs and not only buy their food from XYZ, they also know that they're giving a portion to help no-kill shelters. Or, I'm making this up. So what community have you created for that consumer? That's another, important aspect of kind of brand loyalty.
Yeah, no, that definitely puts it in a bit more of a perspective, and maybe kind of extending on that point a bit. We just talked about voice, but I envision, at least from a a community standpoint or a branding standpoint, that of course at some point we're going to break free of these current ecosystems of voice assistants, and I kind of envision a world where every brand, specifically every retailer, is going to have their own unique, voice and air quotes, with whether that be a voice assistant or some other type of conversational technology.
Yep.
Do you envision that as well, where I could be talking to the voice of Trader Joe's or the voice of Target or the voice of Dick's Sporting Goods, or do you envision a future like that as well?
I do, actually, and it's interesting to think about that, and it kind of talks to my earlier point of, but you control your data. So it'd be great if every retailer has their own kind of voice thing, okay? But it doesn't mean your data has to be duplicated across all of those. You have a repository that you then use. You're able to use all these retailers' voice things, which again goes back to making a frictionless experience. And so, yeah, I really think that that's kind of a cool way to think about it. And I think it will look like that.
Yeah, I can almost envision, like, you may have, let's call them anchor platforms, like maybe what we have now with, Alexa, Google Assistant, Bixby, all these different things. But, of course, one of the initiatives we're working on in OVN is to try and, create some type of registry or VRS system to kind of pull everything together. I honestly can see where, maybe you have an interaction with, say, Alexa, but then it connects you with the voice assistant for Trader Joe's, or it connects you with the voice assistant for Dick's Sporting Goods, or Target or Walmart or whatever you have it.
Yep.
I can completely see that being a possibility, and I think there's going to be potentially a more of a market for maybe even layering that on top of existing mobile phone applications, because I don't think the smartphone is about to go anytime soon with this.
Right.
But I can see, like, you open up one of your apps right now that you have for a retailer, and you're just automatically interacting with their voice assistant, which still speeds up the process of searching for things, adding it to the cart, and I think it would enhance the overall customer experience. I don't know if you have any thoughts or a crystal ball on how that could play out.
I agree with your assessment, and the funny part is even though it seems like kind of so far in the future, that part of how you describe the app and being able to communicate to it is almost 1.0.
Yeah.
And so, it'll become more seamless. The word seamless will take on a whole new meaning as you kind of go through the iterations of this. But yeah, I agree. And the point here is that the customer is at the center.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to think about, what should you as the retailer who are dealing with everyday challenges, and you got to keep one foot in front of the other, and you have to see, oh my God, what am I going to do to survive tomorrow? And I can't think about this right now. Okay. When you think about what could they be thinking about doing today, to kind of prepare for this brave new world while they're dealing with kind of a craziness of their everyday life.
Right.
It has to do with that customer experience and thinking about the seamlessness of it. And more importantly, the today thing is, no matter what, every day you should be looking to make all of your technology, every single touch point, no matter what you're doing, mobile first. And when I say that, I mean anything you think of it rendering on a mobile screen, because that's what the consumer is doing 24/7, a mobile screen. So whether it's, how they're dealing with pickup or how they're dealing with different in-store experiences or whatever, you still today, to prepare for the future, is constantly be thinking, I only have the real estate of this mobile device.
Yep. And yeah, and I'll even admit, when we had the series of different, um, shutdowns, we'll call them, over, when COVID first started, I had to go get something at Kohl's and the entire experience was done on my phone. Likewise, when I used to go return things for Amazon in store, you use the QR code that's on your phone. And I mean, it's just such a mobile experience now with shopping. It's almost like, to your point, if you aren't focused on mobile, that's a huge detriment. And it's not even going to allow you to progress into the next phase, which could be voice or whatever comes next. Right.
Right. Exactly.
So no, I definitely say, if you're a listener right now who works in the retail space and has an opportunity to dive a bit deeper into some of this, definitely do that and make sure you have a mobile first strategy, because that'll be the gatekeeper, I think, into a lot of these new future technologies we have. But Vicki, this has been such an amazing conversation. I've learned so much, and I even feel like after this, I'm going to go back to the drawing board with some of the stuff we're working on, and maybe pen in focusing on the customer a bit more compared to what we have been doing. So I really appreciate all your insight. And as we wind things down here, I always like to leave on this one question. What is one thing that you think someone can do today to begin leveraging, let's just say any emerging technology, AI, voice, cloud? I know that's kind of a tall order, but what is one thing that someone can do today to begin leveraging some of these emerging technologies, either personally or within their organization?
We talked a little bit about it within your organization. Make sure that you're never losing sight of the North Star of the, mobile first and customer first. But in general, I would say that no shiny objects. Okay.
Yes.
Don't have a robot in your store aisles if it's not going to move the needle.
Right.
And thankfully, I don't have to say that now, because I think people are very clear on what do I have to do to survive tomorrow. Okay.
Right.
But I would also say, how do you utilize these technologies? Look, there's a ton of information out there. I would say use your community and your peers more than you even ever have before. Rely on the people in your industry, in your peer group, because they're all trying something and they're all struggling. And the better you can utilize what they're doing, the better you are together. So, rather than say, oh, go look at this or that or the other technology, talking to each other in your peer network, which has always been the best way to buy technology or figure out whether you should use technology, is now it's even more important.
I think that's excellent advice, and advice that I actually haven't heard too often, but that I really like that, because I think sometimes we get wrapped up in, oh, I just have to go look at this, or I have to do this, or I have to research this, when in fact you can activate the community and the people, to your point, your peers and colleagues you already have, and find out from them, hey, have you used this? Which almost kind of, if it's gone successful, then you already kind of have an idea that maybe that's the direction you go. Or if they say, oh, this has not worked for us whatsoever, then you save yourself a lot of time, money, and resources from even investigating it to begin with. So I think that's absolutely excellent advice. But
Nick, the other aspect of that, and just if I could finish here, people have had to behave differently, and the solution providers, the vendor community, and the retailers are finding new ways to work together too. Which is one thing that Vendors in Partnership is helping to promote and
fantastic.
highlight. but your peers include your broad ecosystem of solution providers. They have so much knowledge. So drop the barriers and let's figure out what works.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's an excellent closing point. Well, Vicki, again, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me and share so much of your knowledge in retail, customer experience, technology. I mean, like I said, I've learned so much in this discussion we've had, and I know the listeners will as well. But if anybody wanted to connect with you or reach out to you, what are some of the best ways for them to go about doing so?
Best way probably is LinkedIn. And you'll get to me via that way, and would love to hear from you. Also, certainly Twitter and Vicki at vendorsandpartnership.com.
Fantastic. Well, Vicki, thanks so much again. I'm excited, of course, to keep working with you and OVN and make progress on some of this really important stuff. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm excited to keep in touch.
Great. Same here, Nick. Thanks so much for the time.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Artificial
Intelligence.
voice recognition, machine learning.
Robotics.
You've been listening to the Artificial Podcast with your host, Nick Myers.
Nick Myers.
To stay up to date with all our latest episodes, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. To learn more about how your organization can benefit by unlocking the power of AI and voice, visit www.redfox-ai.com. Until next time.